The movie opens with a beautiful view of snow-capped mountains where a pretty woman stands. Her beautiful green eyes reflect a profound sense of purpose as she watches an avalanche happening some feet away from her. She has a proud smile on her face because she successfully predicted the avalanche before it happened. The woman's name's Heather. She's a remarkable avalanche researcher that has dedicated years of her life to studying the intricacies of this natural phenomenon. With a resolute passion for her field, she has delved deep into the mysteries of avalanches, tirelessly exploring their behavior, triggers, and impact on the surrounding environment. After years of research, she has finally developed a program that helps to predict an avalanche with precision, minimizing the margin for error. It's a groundbreaking discovery, and she's planning on using it to help people all over the world. Heather is passionate, strong-willed, and selfless. She spent years studying only to find solutions for a problem that can save people's lives. She loves the mountains and snow more than anything, so when her college friend, a man named Eric, calls her with the proposal she knows she can't refuse. Eric is the manager of a new resort nestled in the Alps of Fernie, and when he read about Heather's new program, he recognized the immense value it could bring to his establishment. His resort's main attractions are the winter activities, and most of them include being in the mountains. With a firm conviction in the importance of guest safety, he invites Heather to come to Fernie to teach his team how to use her program. She readily agrees, knowing this is a great opportunity for her to show the value of her work. After talking to Eric, she calls her sister, Riley, to tell her the great news. Riley isn't very happy because she and Heather had been planning to go to Hawaii on vacation, and she's not looking forward to going to cold and snowy Fernie. Heather convinces her that it's going to be fun and she can relax in the resort spa, so Riley agrees. A few days later, they arrive in Fernie. Fernie is a beautiful town perfect for nature lovers and those in search of a peaceful place to stay. The resort is surrounded by towering peaks and pine forests, and it's impossible not to be captivated by it. Heather points out to Riley that the place is better than Hawaii, and her sister agrees. It's beautiful and perfect for a vacation. Eric approaches the sisters and hugs Heather tightly. Heather introduces her sister to him, and they joke that Heather is a matchmaker because she introduced Eric to his wife and Riley to her husband. Heather rolls her eyes because she knows her sister is going to make fun of her love life, or lack thereof. Heather has always been focused on her research and she had no time to fall in love. Riley thinks she should find a person to share her life with, but Heather disagrees. Her work is her priority and she's happy like that. They go around the resort with Eric and he mentions that Heather is going to work with his team. He thinks she's going to be a great addition, especially convincing his director to use the new technology in the resort. His director is a stubborn man that prefers to do things old school. The resort spent loads of money on Heather's program, and now she has to convince a stranger to use it. Heather is always eager to prove her value, so it's not discouraging in the slightest. After registering, they go around the resort to see what it offers. Once outside, the sisters see a handsome man wearing a search and rescue uniform. He's tall, blonde, and, according to Riley, hot and hunky. The man is attractive, but nothing special in Heather's eyes. They decide to hear what he's talking about and he gets more interesting to her. His name's Chris. He's responsible for teaching the guests how to act if they find themselves in the middle of an avalanche. Heather attentively watches as he explains how the rescue dogs work, and when he asks for a volunteer, Riley offers Heather. Annoyed by her sister's push, Heather stands next to the man. He starts talking about avalanches and explaining it to Heather, assuming she is just a city girl who knows nothing about the subject. Heather bites her tongue and follows his direction. After the demonstration, Heather wants to return to the resort, but Riley is more interested in meeting Chris. Not for herself, since she's married, but for Heather. She subtly asks the man if he's married, and he replies that he isn't. Meanwhile, Heather tries not to cringe at her sister's thirst. When she introduces herself properly, she mentions that she's an avalanche expert. Chris looks condescendingly at her, not believing her abilities. Before Heather can defend herself, a teenage girl of about 12 years old approaches. Her name's Samantha and she's Chris's daughter. She's a nice, easygoing girl and she works with her father training the dogs. After meeting Chris and Sam, Riley excitedly thinks Heather should go for the man. She insists that her sister has to find someone in her life, but Heather wants to focus on her career. Chris also sounded condescending when talking to her, assuming she's an airhead that knows nothing about the mountains. Later on, Chris tucks Sam into bed and talks to her about her day. He's a good father and they have a very close relationship. Chris was married, but his wife passed away when Sam was still a toddler. Ever since then, Chris focuses on raising his daughter and working as a rescuer and avalanche expert. There's a picture of his wife in Sam's bedroom, and when Heather is having dinner with Riley at the restaurant, she notices the same picture on the mantelpiece. The picture has a woman with ski gear and a big smile on her face. Heather stares at it curiously before shifting her attention back to her sister, insisting she has to find a boyfriend. Heather changes the subject to talk about Riley's marriage and her wish to get pregnant. The next day, Heather is prepared to give a lecture about her program to Eric's employees. She's excited about it and ready to show the effectiveness of her work. As she's talking, Chris enters the room. He had begrudgingly accepted going to the lecture after Eric's insistence. Chris doesn't believe in technology and thinks Heather's program is foolish. In his opinion, the weather is unpredictable. The notion of a robot anticipating the whims and caprices of nature appears inconceivable to him. Heather notices the way he's looking at her and she hates it. She doesn't understand why the man has such animosity towards her work. He doesn't know her and he makes assumptions based on pure prejudice. It makes her skin crawl. She takes a deep breath and snaps her eyes away from the gruff man. At least the rest of the employees look interested and that's enough for her. After coughing and disrupting her presentation, Heather watches from the corner of her eyes Chris leaving. After the lecture, Heather forgets about Chris. It's time for her to install her equipment and she's very excited to do it. Her excitement diminishes a bit at this, but she's determined to show Chris that she's serious about her work. Eric firmly believes that if there's anyone capable of persuading someone like Chris, it's undoubtedly Heather. In his eyes, they're a perfect match waiting to happen. However, Heather vehemently denies any such possibility, refuting the idea with unwavering determination. Chris isn't happy about spending time with her either. For some reason, he doesn't take her seriously. Maybe it's her appearance since she looks like a model. He doesn't like the fact that a girl from the city calls herself a scientist and expert in avalanches. When they meet, Heather tries to be nice to him, but it's obvious he doesn't care much for her. He keeps patronizing her and acting as if she doesn't know anything. She gets tired of it quickly and wonders if he's an avalanche purist, to which he replies he is. They go to the peak of a mountain in awkward silence, neither willing to break it. A few moments later they arrive at the place where she's going to put her equipment. Despite his rejection to learn anything from her, she starts explaining how her program works. Chris listens to her with a skeptical look on his face. When she finishes, he decides to show her his method, the one he thinks is infallible. Heather agrees that his method is good enough, though way more complicated than hers. Chris wonders if Heather knows how to ski and she does. She even brought her ski gear with her to go down the mountain. Once again, Chris assumes that she's bad at skiing, but she shows him he's wrong. She's great at it. Chris is shocked and begrudgingly compliments her skills. She's even better than he is. He mentions there was only one woman that good, but he doesn't say it was his wife. Heather has no clue. She jokingly tells him that she's as good a scientist and that he should give her a chance. When she goes back to the resort, her sister insists they go to the spa to relax. Heather wanted to work, but Riley is relentless when she wants to be. They go to the spa and while she's distracted talking to Riley, she bumps into a shirtless Chris. He has just come out of a massage, that's why he's shirtless. Heather has to swallow the drool at Chris's toned physique. Riley doesn't. From behind Chris, a red-haired woman appears staring at Heather with interest. She introduces herself as Sonia, the masseuse. She implies she was doing something else with Chris in the room, and he gets flushed. Sonia likes Chris and seeing him talking to Heather makes her jealous. Unfortunately for Heather, Sonia is going to be her masseuse. During their session, Sonia keeps asking questions about Heather's relationship with Chris and tells her inappropriate accounts of her date with him. Heather is very uncomfortable and it's obvious to her that the woman is jealous. She doesn't need to be. Heather and Chris are barely more than strangers and she's still offended that he treats her work like trash. Sonia doesn't know that and she wants to stake her claim. After the terrible massage, Heather is in more pain than before. When she tells Riley about the woman's strange behavior, Riley comments that Sonia is probably jealous. Heather is a beautiful woman and there's some noticeable tension between her and Chris. Heather thinks it's ridiculous, but deep down she admits to finding Chris attractive. If only he kept his mouth shut about her work. A few hours later, Heather is in the resort restaurant waiting for her food and staring at Chris' wife's portrait. Chris arrives at the place and approaches her. They make small talk and she asks who the woman in the picture is. Chris doesn't show any emotion on his face when he says her name is Reagan. He doesn't mention that she's his wife either. A waiter interrupts them to give Chris his food and wish him a good time with his girl. Heather concludes his girl is Sonia, but it's Sam. She wishes him a good date and waits for her turn. Chris notices her wincing every so often and asks what's wrong. She tells him that the massage wasn't relaxing and she's feeling pain. In turn, Chris offers her some aspiring to help her out. It's the most civilized he has been with her, so she accepts. They go to his office, a small place where he spends most of his time, and he gives her the aspirin. Before she leaves, he cheekily tells her that she should ask Sonia to take it easier next time. Heather wonders if she's going to see him the next day and he asks if she's going to continue gaming with her program. Eager to defend the integrity of her work, she tries to reason with him. Unfortunately, his dismissive remarks only serve to further wound her pride, triggering a defensive response from Heather as she tries to protect her work from his belittling. It's pointless. Seeing that she's getting incensed, Chris excuses himself to go back to his daughter. Heather is surprised at hearing this because she thought he was going to meet with Sonia. She points that out to him and he chuckles embarrassingly, saying that the only girlfriend he has is his daughter. A flutter of butterflies takes flight in her stomach, finding solace in the realization that he is not romantically involved with Sonia. Later on, while Chris is having dinner with Sam and talking about their days, Sonia walks into their house. She seems comfortable breaking into the house without announcing. Chris is surprised to see her there. After all, he never gave her any indication that they were more intimate than they are. Sonia doesn't think so. Sam has no idea who the woman is, though Sonia keeps trying to force an intimacy she doesn't have. She tells Chris that the power in her house went off and she had nowhere else to go. She asks to sleep at their house, which is weird, but Chris is too polite to turn her down. Sonia smiles in triumph when he says she can stay there, thinking about her seduction plan. She's sure she's going to make Chris fall for her. She only needs the perfect opportunity. Chris is clueless about her scheming. He makes up the couch for her to sleep on, right next to the family's dogs. Sam is the only one who knows what the woman is trying to do. She doesn't approve of Sonia, especially not when she's trying to go to her father's bedroom to talk to him and Sonia makes her go away. Her seduction tactic is a failure because Chris isn't interested in the slightest. He considers her a friend, nothing more. The following day, Heather is showing Eric how her program works when Chris barges in. She excitedly tries to show him how her program works, but he brushes her off. It hurts. Heather is disappointed at his slight and Eric looks at her with sympathy. He knows Chris can be a hard nut to crack and he also knows his reasons to reject the program so hard. For some reason, he's under the assumption that Heather knows too. That's why he doesn't mention it to her. After meeting Chris, Heather goes cross-country skiing with Riley. They talk about Chris and how stubborn he is. Riley thinks Heather should give him a chance, but Heather can't forget how he acts at her work. For a woman who has spent years of her life creating an intricate program, Chris' dismissiveness hurts Heather. He's a nice person, a good father, and an accomplished rescuer. Unquestionably, his greatest flaw, in Heather's perspective, is his inability to be open to new experiences. While the sisters are talking, Sonia appears out of nowhere to challenge Heather. They start a competition of cross-country skiing, with Sonia goading Heather. The scientist has no idea why she's indulging in her childish antics, but she's not about to lose. A part of her feels as if it's a competition to see who's better for Chris, and sadly, she loses. Sonia goes away crackling like a madwoman while Heather looks on in disbelief. There's another Avalanche training that Chris is going to give and Heather signs up for it. Chris doesn't understand why she's going and thinks she wants to undermine him with her knowledge. Heather would never do something like that. She genuinely wants to learn more from him, because she can admit that he's good at what he does. They both are. They just work with different methods. The training is fun and with each passing moment, Heather's admiration for the gruff man intensifies. She's not alone. Chris also admires how passionate Heather is and how open to learning she is. He has to admit that he thought she would be a presumptuous city girl, trying to teach him how to do his job. It was the opposite. Heather is humble and down to earth. After the training, Chris invites Heather to go skiing with him again and she agrees. She's a bit afraid of Sonia appearing out of nowhere to knock her off, and Chris notices. She explains about the competition and again Chris tells her he has nothing with Sonia. He has never given her any reason to think there is. They went on a date one time, months back, but it didn't work out. Heather is happy to get confirmation, not willing to admit that a small part of her was afraid Sonia was right. They meet Sam when they arrive at the resort, and Sam invites Heather to see her dogs. While Chris goes away to grab some hot chocolate for the ladies, Sam tells Heather that she loves studying avalanches. She explains that her mother used to study them a lot, too. That's where Sam's interest comes from. Heather is surprised, especially when Sam points out that the woman in the picture at the resort is her mother. She finds it strange that Chris didn't mention anything. Chris comes back and Sam tells Heather that her father wants to ask her something. Chris flushes in embarrassment and fumbles to ask Heather about a fundraiser he's going to present at the resort. Sam finds it funny that her father is so embarrassed and tells Heather that he kept an invitation just for her. Heather's heart skips a bit at that, and she smiles softly at him. It's time for the fundraiser and Heather is conflicted. She likes Chris, but his dismissal of her work still stings. She doesn't know if she can have a relationship with someone who doesn't care about what she does. Riley thinks she should go if only to have fun for a night. Heather dresses up and looks stunning. Chris is flabbergasted when he sees her at the fundraiser. She was the prettiest woman in the place and his heart was jumping in his chest with excitement. He compliments her outfit and she blushes prettily, thanking him. He doesn't look bad either, replacing his rescue gear with a casual shirt and tight slacks. While Chris is giving his speech, Heather spends time with Sam. The teenager is a bright girl, and she loves studying avalanches as much as Heather does. Differently from her father, she thinks Heather's program is brilliant. She mentions that Heather reminds her of her mother and that she wants to be like her when she grows up. Heather's emotional over the girl's words. It's great that someone, besides her family and friends, acknowledges her hard work. She's so happy that she hugs Sam and says that she's already a bright young girl. She's sure she's going to be great when she grows up. After the speech, Chris invites Heather to dance and they slow dance the night away. Heather can't stop smiling and Chris can't take his eyes off her. She's one of the most beautiful women he has ever seen. Yet, it is not only her physical beauty that captivates him. The goodness of her heart makes her all the more enchanting to him. While they dance, Sam watches with a big grin. She thinks they look perfect together and she likes Heather a lot. She's not overbearing or arrogant. She loves what she does and she's an inspiration to Sam. Sonia also watches them and she approaches Sam to talk to her. She doesn't look happy with Heather dancing with Chris. Sam knows it. In the most polite way she can, she tells Sonia to leave them alone. Sonia is shocked that the girl would brush her off like that, but she admits defeat. Moving on, Sam and Chris go out in the morning to have breakfast and Chris notices she's too quiet. He wonders if she's alright and she tells him that she thinks Heather came into their lives for a reason. Chris is surprised that his only daughter likes Heather so much, especially since he never had any relationships after Reagan. Sam suggests Chris takes Heather on a romantic picnic in their special place, and he agrees. With his daughter's blessing, there's no stopping him from taking Heather on a date. After leaving Sam at home, he goes after Heather to the resort. He tells her right off the bat that he's there to take her on a date. He likes her and he wants to see where the relationship goes. Heather is still a bit unsure, but she agrees. They go to a place in the mountains that has a great view. Heather is enchanted. She's even more surprised that Chris brought her to his special place with Sam. It's a great honor for her to be there. They talk a lot during their date, and Chris finally finds out why Heather works with Avalanches. Her college best friend passed away in one, and Heather has felt guilty ever since because she was going skiing with her. In honor of her friend, Heather started studying nonstop to figure out a way to predict avalanches. Her story touches Chris' heart because it's so similar to his. He also decided to become a rescuer because he lost Reagan to an avalanche. He doesn't say that, though. He only mentions that her friend must be proud of her accomplishments. It's good enough for Heather. Chris asks Heather to tell him something she has never done, and she admits she has never fallen in love. It's shocking to Chris because Heather is a great person. He's amazed that she's still single. Heather explains that she just never found the time to date and get to know someone that deeply. He understands her. He has only been in love once, with his wife. A few minutes later, they are almost kissing when there's a thunderous sound that breaks them apart. Hours later, they go back to the resort to meet Riley and Sam. Sam can barely contain her excitement. Along with Riley, she's their biggest shipper. When the father and daughter leave, Riley wants to know everything. Heather is over the moon and she knows she's falling for Chris. The only problem is the way he still talks about her work. Riley still thinks she should go for it. It's Heather's last day in the resort before they go back home. She has to figure out if she wants to be with Chris or not. She goes after him but meets Sam instead. She plays with her and the dogs for a moment, knowing the girl likes spending time with her. A few minutes later, she goes to Chris' office to see if he's there. A surge of hope courses through her veins as she catches him examining her program. She thinks he's finally going to give her a chance, but she's mistaken. When she asks what he has against her work, he doesn't reply. Heather is hurt again. She thought they could work through their differences if he was honest with her, but for some reason, Chris refuses. Heather doesn't understand and it makes her feel insecure. She hates that she starts questioning the value of her work because of him. She refuses to be that kind of woman, so she tells him that she's leaving. Chris tries talking to her but it's too late. Heather goes back to her room and packs her bags. She's sad and disappointed. She tried making him listen, tried being patient, but it was too hard. She prefers to leave before they have a worse argument. Later on, when she and Riley are ready to leave, their driver tells them that there's a snowstorm and their flight was canceled. They have to go back to the resort to wait it out. Riley goes back to the room and Heather stays in the lounge thinking about her life. Eric approaches her and she confesses to him that she failed at convincing Chris. Eric comforts her and finally tells her the reason why Chris is so against technology. The day Reagan passed away, she was trying her new equipment. It failed her. What Chris doesn't understand is that technology changed a lot after 13 years and that Heather's program is completely different. Sadly, Heather won't have the chance to tell him that. As she waits for the storm to be over, she checks her program. She notices that there's a warning for an avalanche and remembers that Eric told her Chris was on a rescue mission. She quickly goes after Eric to show him that, but he already knew. They quickly call Chris and the stubborn man refuses to listen. Heather pleads with him to believe in her, and after a long time, he agrees. Good for him because moments later, there's an avalanche at the exact place he was standing before. Heather's program saved his life. When he's back at the resort after a successful mission, Heather shyly approaches him. Chris is man enough to apologize for his doubts and thank her for saving his life. Heather bashfully brushes him off, but he continues. He asks her to stay there with him and Sam, to see where their relationship can go. She can continue working at the resort, and they can have a life together. Heather doesn't answer right away. After all, it's a lot for her to change. The only thing she knows for sure is that she likes Chris. She's falling for him. She also loves Sam and she's sure they are going to be great friends. In the end, she cheekily tells Chris that she's going to think about his proposal, and they finally kiss.